Here's the thing, life is a marathon, it's not a sprint. And if you just do nose to the grindstone and you don't spend any money on anything and you hoard your points and then you cash them out just so that you can have a little bit more in your brokerage account, I think that is often setting yourself up for a lot of misery. And those are going to be the people who get to fire and don't know what to do.
Hey there, points people. You just heard a clip from Kathleen at the Reframe podcast. Kathleen has used points and miles to travel the world with her family while still pursuing FIRE, financial independence, retire early. Kathleen and her family have traveled to Italy, Japan, Greece, Denmark, and more, all on points and miles while staying on track to retire in their mid-40s. In this episode, expect to hear about our philosophies on approaching financial independence and also the game of points, if points are more valuable for somebody who usually pays for business class anyway, or somebody who would otherwise never be able to afford it. What parts of the game are important to track versus which pieces really don't matter. And so much more. And if you are looking to maximize your points so you can travel like Kathleen, you can request a free personalized tutorial video at geobreezetravel.com/request. We pick one free tutorial to prepare every week, which you'll find in the free GeoBreeze Travel newsletter. So make sure you check out our newsletter every Monday to see if your request was picked and prepared. And now, on with the show. Hey, Kathleen, welcome to the GeoBreeze Travel podcast.
Hello, Julia. I am very happy to be here.
I'm very excited to have you here as well and to talk about one of my favorite topics that I feel like we haven't talked about for a while on the podcast, which is FIRE, financial independence, retire early, and how that works alongside with the points journey and how sometimes it does not work. But before we get into all of that, tell us about you. How did you get into FIRE and also points?
Well, I am a lawyer at a big firm in Washington, D.C., which is a job that takes a lot out of you. You, as a former actuary, probably know what those sort of hours can be like. And probably a little over a decade ago, my husband and I were doing this for almost a decade. And we said, we don't want to be 65 and still grinding away. Like, there's a different way. We looked at our finances. We said, well, if we stayed on till 65, there would be absolutely no point because there'd be too much money. We've been living below our means. And so we started investigating what are the other options. And like many people, ran into Mr. Money Mustache and all of those sort of early 2010s creators. And we realized that there's this thing called financial independence and early retirement. And that just really struck a chord with both of us because we both had sort of creative impulses and many other things that we wanted to do in life. We also loved to travel. At that point, that we had really little kids. And so doing long international trips wasn't quite in the cards. But as they got a little bit older, I thought, well, we want to be able to do all of this travel around the world stuff, but I don't want to like sideline our financial goals. And points and miles and fire work together so beautifully because sort of both sets of people who are into them are very much into optimization, into finding clever ways to get the best value out of things. And so we have been able to continue on our fire journey and take our kids to, I think at this point, they've been to 17 or 18 countries. They're early teens. And not just stay on the fire journey, but my husband pulled the plug and retired in April. And I have 10 days left working as a lawyer.
So exciting. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm very, very excited.
So this opens up a whole bunch of different questions. The first one is, in order to retire early and become financially independent like you did, do you have to be a doctor or a lawyer or actuary or software engineer or some really high paying type of career? Because a lot of people, when they work through the numbers, which basically says like, what do you need to live the life that you want for a year, get 25x that into some kind of investments that compound with interest. It's hard to do that if you're making like 30K a year. Do you have to be a very high earner in order to have this dream?
Well, I think there are various flavors and forms of fire. And if you have been a lower earner, your spending is just naturally going to be lower. So your baseline of what you need to save is going to be lower. That said, yeah, I mean, being a high earner makes it a lot easier. I will fully admit that, like, place of privilege, it makes it a whole hell of a lot easier. But again, there are different sort of spending levels that people have in FIRE. Some people have like what they call lean FIRE, where they're spending maybe $40,000 a year. There's FIRE, where it's a few $100,000 a year, and a whole range in between. Some people also do something where they sort of work up to the point where if they stopped contributing to their investment accounts and they just covered their expenses going forward, they would be okay for a traditional retirement at around 65. And at that point, when they reach that, which is some people call coast fire, they pull back on their careers. So maybe they haven't been super high earners, but they've been able to save enough that they can get themselves through traditional retirement, and then they can have a little bit more flexibility. So that's a long way of saying, I don't think that you have to be a high earner and there's flexibility. That said, it is fully admit way, way easier if you're a high earner and if you're a dual income high earners.
Is your husband a lawyer as well?
Oh, thank God, no. That would be apologies to all my fellow attorneys. No, no, he's actually a former software engineer turned Green Beret turned bank executive. Interesting path. And now he's a man of leisure.
All
Actually,
right.
he's making his own one-man show video game where he's doing all the programming and making the art assets, and he might even record the music. So he's super busy and creative, but he has total flexibility now.
Which comes to our next question. For somebody who's like, okay, I've met my numbers, it's time to retire early, do you have to already have some kind of creative outlet in place? Because there are some people who get into this and they're just so far into the numbers. A lot of computer engineer people do this. And they're like, okay, now we can retire. And then they retire and there wasn't really a plan with what to do with that extra 40 hours or so per week. What are your suggestions on how people can meaningfully fill that time once they're not filling it with career?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great point because a satisfying life is not built with like endless Mai Tais on the beach or endless rounds of golf. You will get very, very bored of that very quickly. So I do think the classic phrase that people use is you have to retire to something, not just from something. And I think that there's real truth in that. At the same time, I think when you're working full time in a professional career and you're balancing maybe a spouse is doing the same and very busy kids, it's really, really freaking hard to carve out the time to know precisely what you're going to retire to. So I think what's important is along the way, if you think that you do want to retire early, do what you can to get bits and pieces, bites and tastes of what you think might be enjoyable to you. And it is definitely a learning process. Like I do community volunteer work on one of our city's commissions on our Economic Development Authority. And that's been a great use of time and I've loved it. I thought about running for city council, learned more about it and said, no, 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 not that. So I think you have to just do bites and tastes of what you think might appeal to you. And it's definitely an iterative process. I wouldn't retire early if I didn't have some sense of how that time would be filled. But I think people shouldn't hold themselves to too high a standard of like, I have to have the perfect plan because one, you're just not going to know. You haven't had the free time to fill before. And two, if you let the perfect be the enemy of the good, you can freeze yourself with indecision. So I think have a taste, have a sense, but give yourself grace that it's going to be a learning process.
What are some things that you took little bits of or little tastes of where you're like, well, that is not how I will be spending my time in retirement? And then what was the plan that you eventually came to?
Yeah, I thought that I was going to like gardening more. Turns out, at least so far, I'm just not really that into gardening. So I was like, okay, I'm going to do sort of minimum viable product attempts at this, and it's not really my thing. But I am getting a lot more time at the gym, and I'm spending more time on my podcast and on the Substack account. And so those are the things that are working. And the beautiful front yard garden just might not be my thing.
Where does points and miles fit into your fire vision?
So we want to be able to travel as a family and travel extensively. And obviously, with two retired parents, you're still stuck with the school schedule, but you have a lot of flexibility. I want to be able to take 20, 30, $50,000 worth of travel a year, but still not pay anywhere near that amount out of pocket. So I have been able to spend a lot of time doing sort of deep dives on learning more about earning and more about smart burning. I've been in the points and miles space for 15 years or so, but like over the last 5 years or so, really up that game. The kids are old enough and I have enough knowledge. We are taking multiple bigger international trips every year at really pennies on the dollar. And like you, I think it's silly when people try to like not brag, but overstate how much value they're getting for things. Like if I book a international business class flight, I'm not going to track it as like whatever the one-way international business class flight cost. Because if you're spending your real money, you're not going to pay one-way international business class prices. But it's been wonderful because now I've got the sort of time and the space and the knowledge base to be able to book several larger international trips per year for really pennies on the dollar. And then also intersperse throughout the year lots of fun little domestic weekends. So since 2022 or so is when we really upped the international travel. It was, once everything opened up again post COVID. And it's been a blast. We're getting using, I think, pretty conservative metrics between $40,000 and $50,000 to travel a year after accounting for all the taxes and fees.
There's a common debate or talking point in the world of points and miles where it's like, is it saved if you weren't going to spend that in the first place? Where there are people who spend $10,000 per flight. They're business travelers. They have to be somewhere on a certain day. Maybe they partner with Emirates or something where they really are spending that much money and they could use points to cover it. Are the points worth more to the people who would be paying for it anyway versus somebody where you hear all the time, oh, I would never actually pay that much for this flight, but since it's covered on points, we're going to take it. Would you say that the points are worth more to somebody if they're actually paying that much, or it's worth more to somebody who would never be able to afford it in the first place?
It's a good philosophical question, and I really am not sure what the answer might be. I think you could really go either way. What I do want to make sure I do in accounting for what costs are is maybe I wouldn't have purchased the international flight on my own dime. But if I did, I would have purchased it in a round trip fashion where each leg is a lot cheaper. So when I'm accounting for something, I might say, I wouldn't have purchased business class Air France tickets for my family to go to Rome, but I booked them with points and I booked them one way. When I account for that dollar value, I'm going to look at what if I had booked it the round trip and I'm going to do half the cost. So I think that there's kind of a middle ground of fair accounting where, yeah, I mean, we're getting more value because we're having a much nicer trip. So I'm not going to say like the only value we're getting is what we otherwise would have paid out of pocket. We're getting a much nicer experience. At the same time, I'm not going to like jigger the numbers so that you would sort of maximize that cent per point valuation. I don't know if there's like one answer to your question because it really is like a philosophical question.
Next philosophical question. Does it matter? Does it
I
matter
don't
if
think,
somebody got 4 cents per point or 14?
no, it doesn't matter because I think when we are looking at those metrics, if no one else knew, would we care? Now, I think that there's value in trying to get the best value you can from your points and like use them wisely. That's just good stewardship of your resources. But if you couldn't tell anybody that you got 4 or 14 cents per point, would you actually care? And I think that's kind of the test or the question to use with ourselves. Like, if we couldn't put it on Instagram, would it matter to us? And if it doesn't, then like it actually probably doesn't really matter. So it drives me a little batty when a lot of things are clearly being done for sort of social media performative purposes. And do I post our trips on social media? I do. Yes. I try to do it in an educational way that like teaches the sort of other moms at the pool how they can actually get into this space. But in terms of the cents per point bragging, I don't think it matters.
On the fire side, where people are always like, okay, you could take these trips or you can just get to fire faster, especially when people are first getting started, where they're like really obsessed with getting to that first 100K because that's where compounding really starts to work in your favor. Does that matter as much? Where people are like time to fire or how fast they can retire or all of the other metrics? Because people who are in financial independence, me included, back in the day were really into these metrics. And at some point, you hit them pretty fast. And at some point, like you mentioned, it'll compound and you won't really know what to do with all of that. How much does it matter to track all of those versus to just chill out a little bit?
Well, I think the tracking can be fun and it can help you just become wiser about your decision making. But I think that there is a real danger in those early fire stages when people cut out every bit of pleasure in their lives And here's the thing, life is a marathon, it's not a sprint. And if you just do nose to the grindstone and you don't spend any money on anything and you hoard your points and then you cash them out just so that you can have a little bit more in your brokerage account, I think that is often setting yourself up for a lot of misery. And those are going to be the people who get to fire and don't know what to do because they haven't spent the time sort of exploring, who am I? What do I like? And I think travel helps us do some of that exploration, not just in terms of understanding like whether we want to travel a lot, but just sort of broadening our view of the world and what's interesting and what's beautiful. And so I think that early in the fire stage, there's a danger of going too hardcore. And I'd say, hey, if you're building up some points and miles and you're on your fire journey, spend them, like earn and burn, baby. Life is supposed to be fun along the way. You're not just going to a destination. I mean, there is a journey, and how we spend our days is how we spend our lives. And if you're spending multiple decades in misery, that's just not worth it. I'd rather take a slightly longer trip to fire.
That's a good point with the dangers of fire early in your journey. What are the dangers later on in your journey once you've been working at it for a few years, maybe a couple decades, depending on how long the journey is? What are some roadblocks or some issues that people run into with the fire philosophy once they've been in it for a while?
There's definitely one more year syndrome where people say, okay, I looked at my numbers. And yeah, if you go with just a 4% rule where you need 25 times your annual spend and you're assuming sort of moderate returns and it should account for a sequence of return risk, and you're like, okay, I'm at the 25x. But my next bonus is 6 months away. I've already worked half the year towards my next bonus. I should just stay for that. And I also maybe I don't want it to be 25x, I want it to be 30x or 33x. You can sort of get very nervous towards the end. And one more year, and you can do that into the grave, frankly. So I think at the end, towards the end of the journey, it's the risk of constantly reevaluating your number and your needs because you're nervous, which is understandable. I mean, it's a huge leap to make to go from someone who's been making a very healthy income for a decade, 2.5 decades, to suddenly not having a paycheck. I mean, frankly, again, I have 10 days left working. It's kind of terrifying. But if you trust the numbers, if you've done the Monte Carlo simulations, if you've used Projection Lab and you've read Big Earns series on safe withdrawal rates, and if the numbers look good, I would just caution people like, don't one more year yourself into just traditional retirement. Like at a certain point, we are working, we are spending like the years of our lives for money that we don't need. And remember the value of freedom is what I would say. So the big risk towards the end is the one more year, the fear.
For people who are listening to this and they're like, I have not run the Monte Carlo simulations or any of those other words, is it necessary to do that?
I think it's wise. The sort of back of the envelope math is in most cases, if you save 25 times your annual spending, you can withdraw at a 4% rate. In most cases, your money will be compounding at least that 4% rate plus inflation so that you won't run out of money. Now, the original simulations for these things were run on a 30-year retirement, not on a 50, 60, 70-year retirement. I mean, God willing, we're all going to live to like 110. So I think while folks can use the back of the envelope math as a starting point, I do think it's important to run more sophisticated simulations because Monte Carlo simulations look at a whole range of like if you retired into a series of terrible markets and would your portfolio survive to keep you financially solvent until your estimated date of death. It's a very stoic exercise to say, when do I die? So I do think that it's important to run some more sophisticated simulations. Also, spending over time is just lumpy. If you have kids, you are probably going to have some sort of extra expenses as they get older. Like daycare goes away, but you're going to have college. If you want to help them with down payments on homes, or if you want to help them with weddings or other big purchases, you may want to factor that into your spending assessment for what you're going to need during fire. If you think you want to replace your car every so many years, I like to drive a car into the ground, but some people want a new car every 5 years. You're going to need to factor that into your spending. Spending is lumpy. If you think that to stay in your house, you are going to want to do a big $200,000 kitchen renovation, you should factor that in. So there are all of these tools. Projection Lab is a really great one. My husband also built our own like custom simulator and we ran both sets of numbers and they were all coming out the same. But it's a great tool that can let you look at that anticipated lumpy spending and can look at what you would be comfortable with in terms of adjusting your withdrawal rate if the market is bad or if the market is good. Do you want to adjust your withdrawal rate upwards? And it can give you an estimate as to likelihood of failure. So back of the envelope is a great place to start. I would not stop there. I mean, this is your future. And I think that we all need to be really thoughtful adults about it, particularly if there are kids in the picture. And for some careers, it's easier to jump in and out. Like if I know nurses can often do shift work. And so maybe they can go away for a little while and keep their certifications up to date. But if they decide they need to go back because the portfolio is not looking great, they can do that. With like a lawyer at a big firm, yeah, I could go do other legal work. Don't want to, but like you can't jump right back into that sort of same high earning big firm work. So some careers just have a little bit more of an expiration date on them. And if you're in one of those fields, I think it's particularly important to be thoughtful and thorough in your analysis.
The approach to how you manage money when you're trying to go for fire, how does that differ from the approach of managing points and miles? Because it's definitely not the same approach of just be responsible and I'm not going to run Monte Carlo simulations on my points. What are the
Yeah.
main differences in how to approach these?
Well, I mean, I think with your money, you want to save it and have it in the market for as long as possible. Time in the market is better than timing the market and put it in, get into a low cost index fund and you're going to be good. With points, points don't compound, points devalue. And so I do think with points, you want to earn them smart, intelligently, and you want to earn them rapidly if you're planning to do a lot of travel. But I think hoarding points, yeah, you want to hoard your money. It's your livelihood for the rest of your life. But I think hoarding points is generally just not a good approach. They devalue over time. I mean, we all know that like instant devaluations can happen often with no notice. I mean, what just a week or two ago, United was like fussing around with their, partner airline points redemption rates. And I think it went one way, then it went another way. And a few times a month, you see emails hitting your inbox about unexpected points devaluation or even expected, like Hyatt redoes their chart every year and some things are going to go up. So points lose value, money gains value. So I'm very much on the earn and burn side for points. You want a comfortable little margin in there so that if an awesome deal pops up, you can book it. But I don't think that there's any value in trying to accumulate 5, 10 million points.
Oh, yeah, absolutely not. If my balances in total get over a couple million, I get a little bit nervous there.
Yeah, yeah.
There are some financial vehicles, like I use Basque Bank, which not sponsored or anything, but it's like where I store my emergency fund. And instead of earning interest on that, I earn American Airlines miles. I wish more banks would do this. I wish more airlines would do this. And I also understand that by doing this, there is the opportunity cost where I don't earn interest on that money. I'm instead earning points. What are your thoughts about if people should use financial vehicles like that?
I think if it's something like your emergency fund, that's a great use case. For your investments, I think have those in traditional investments. For something where you need it liquid, but you're not counting on the interest that it might otherwise earn as part of your longer term financial strategy, then I think diversifying into something like Basque Bank can be a great use of an emergency fund. It still remains liquid. You can use it for its intended purpose, and then you're getting kind of a fun little bonus. And I'm sure you can have run the numbers in terms of like, what is that opportunity cost when you look at how you are able to redeem AA miles? I mean, frankly, higher interest savings accounts are running around 3.5% now. You're probably getting really good valuation for your AA miles. So, I mean, you may be coming out ahead. This is just mental math I'm doing right now. So I think it can be great. I like that sort of creativity. And I also, like you, wish that more folks did it. I have been seeing in the Amex app under one of my business cards a thing where it's open a business checking account and earn 70,000 Amex points. And I keep sort of intending to do that because it's similar to what you're talking about. I guess it's checking and savings account bonuses, like cash bonuses, bopping around from bank to bank, because I like to just get that sort of free money. But if it could come in the form of points, I think it's a good way for you to force yourself to use them for travel, like to force yourself into having fun.
We talked about how it's a lot easier to reach fire when you just have a high income. Same can be said for points, where points just flow in like gravy. If you have a high enough income to where you can have high expenses, but you're still spending way less than you earn. There's also a camp of thought that points and miles are for people who can't afford to travel like this anyway. Which camp do you tend to fall more into, where points are more useful for people who already make a lot of money and this is just gravy on top, or points are better for people who wouldn't be able to afford this style of travel otherwise?
I mean, I think that you could say they might be more useful for the people who couldn't otherwise afford to travel, particularly if they're sort of not used for the luxury redemptions, but are used for the more economical redemptions. You're taking yourself from zero travel to a small trip or two every year. That sort of increase in well being from a small amount of point spending is probably like a pretty sharp trajectory. And then your line of satisfaction kind of flattens out as you're a higher spender, you're more accustomed to things. It is the hedonic treadmill. The more we accumulate, the more we get used to luxuries, the less they feel like luxuries. So, in terms of actual like well being, if you were like measuring some sort of econometric behavioral psychology measure of well being, my guess is that the actual like well being value per point flattens out at a higher income level. That said, you are absolutely 100% true, right? That the ability to earn points at the higher income level, like it's stratospherically different because you've got more expenses to put on your cards. You can get access to some of the cards that are going to give you more creative options for earning and for redeeming. And especially if you're using things like travel portals, you can really rocket forward your points earning on, I say, just like boring everyday shit like my contact lenses. So I think, yes, your points earning ability is massively improved. Like you get an increase in like the slope of your points earning ability as your income goes up. But I think in terms of satisfaction, you probably get more satisfaction per point at that sort of starting point.
That's a good way to look at it as well. My unpopular hot take on this
Yeah.
is I know that it feels like points and miles is like the shortcut to where you don't have to earn as much money and you can still experience a lot of these really luxurious things that would normally be out of budget. True, but also I would think of this as kind of a really big marshmallow test where if you can get your financial footing down first and say, I'm okay not doing all the crazy cool things I see on Instagram until I have debt paid off. Like, let's start there. Please don't enter this game if you're still juggling credit card debt. If you can delay all of that satisfaction until you have a pretty good financial foundation, it's just gravy on top. It's so much easier. And I know Instagram and the internet makes this seem so easy, but we have to remember that a lot of the people, me included, who do this online, we were pretty well off before we started an Instagram. And I know a lot of people who are not in that same financial position are trying to, like, in their heads, compete with this. And guys, it is not an equitable playing field. A lot of the people who you see as content creators who are like, oh, I'm just like doing this for fun and blah, blah, blah. We and or our spouses were pretty well off before getting on Instagram a lot of the time.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I do think that there's value if you can accumulate a little point stash early on and use it for like the trip to the Gulf Coast of Florida when you otherwise wouldn't be able to have any vacation. I think that there's value in that. And that's not the luxury travel that we see highlighted on Instagram. And I think it is a really good cautionary tale to tell people that, like, if you're just getting started, focus on, as you always say, like real money before fake money. Yeah, get your financial footing in place. And yes, never, never, never pay a cent of interest on your cards. And please don't get an $895 a year annual fee card because it's heavy and pretty and gets you into a lounge that doesn't even have very good food to begin with.
Let's talk about that a little bit more, where as people get into the game and they're like, oh, there's the marginal utility of like the first credit card where you pay an annual fee where you're like, oh, it's a $95 card. And then you're like, oh, this unlocks so much more. in the world of possibilities with points redemptions. And eventually you get a $300 card, $500 card, $900 card. What's your approach that you recommend for people deciding on how many premium cards or if they should even get any premium cards? Because there are more and more launching on the market, and sometimes people are going to find themselves in $6,000 of annual fees pretty quick these days.
Yeah, I think avoiding the multiple premium cards, particularly like carrying them year over year, is really important. Like, I will open, if I could get the Amex Platinum at the 300,000 point offer right now, the Amex Biz Platinum, I would do that because 300,000 Amex points are worth way more than the what, $895 or whatever it is right now annual fee. I would also close that card or downgrade it, I guess close it at the end of the first year, because as I see it, you're paying an annual fee to basically buy those points. I think it's really dangerous when you start to scale up having multiple premium cards and then trying to justify the annual fees, saying like, oh, well, I got $200 off an Aura ring and I'm going to Lululemon. And like, again, would you spend that money in the first place? If not, or if you would spend some fraction of that money in the first place, use that calculation to offset what you think this annual fee, like whether you're really earning back an annual fee. So I would suggest to people there are still plenty of good $95 annual fee cards to jump into the market. Start with that. See if you can handle the card management. Make sure that you're not going into debt and use those cards wisely to start to get your point stash in order. I mean, you can get a 2 point per dollar card that's $95 a year. I mean, that's just the venture card with Capital One. And so I think this sort of the social media algorithm can very quickly get you into thinking that everyone's doing multiple biz plats and the Chase Sapphire Reserve and the Venture X and oh, this new city strata top of the line and the Admirals Club access on this. I just think it's avoid that siren song of thinking you're going to have such a luxurious life by doing this. What you're doing is really throwing a lot of money down the tube after you get the points after the first year.
As far as valuing all of those additional benefits like the Saks Fifth Avenue, the Aura Ring, the Lululemon, all of those, it kind of comes back to like how much is it worth if you weren't going to buy it for yourself anyway?
Yeah.
Taken to another level, like when you have status with different hotels or airlines, they come with certain perks and how much people value those statuses. Like with Hyatt Globalist, I have free breakfast for me and my travel companion whenever we're at most hotels. I don't eat breakfast at home. I have a protein shake. Do I say there's no value in breakfast? Because if I have breakfast, I am absolutely eating breakfast there. Do we value that?
I think if you're eating breakfast instead and then not eating lunch when you're out and about, then you are saving yourself some money. And frankly, I would not value that because it's getting you off of your sort of nutritional goals. Yes, it's fun. That I remember having like a Belgian waffle covered with chocolate chips and coconut syrup at the like Four Seasons Wailea once. It's amazing, but like, no, I'm not going to eat that at home. So I would say if you're just like eating more than you wouldn't really otherwise want to eat, and you're getting off your nutritional goals and you're just kind of doing it because it's free, I actually wouldn't value that. So, like for my husband and myself, we don't eat breakfast. And so, if it's just the two of us traveling, I don't care about that. Now, we have two teen boys, they eat breakfast. So, I think you have to look at like within your family, like what is the value. But you may also end up find that you're just as comfortable and happy booking at a hotel where you don't need any status to get a breakfast because the Residence Inn on the Magnificent Mile, I was just there with my younger son, they have a decent breakfast buffet that everyone gets. And you're in a great location. You get actual free breakfast. And so I was able to save a lot of points and not worry about the status thing. So that's a long way of saying I think the status stuff is similar to the credit card sort of perks and credits. If it's something that you would otherwise do and you're actually saving money, then it's actually worth money. But if it's like just something that you're engaging in because it's there and free, I don't think it has much value. And a lot of people would disagree. I know the free breakfast thing with globalists, people like lionize it, idolize it.
With a lot of the value propositions with status and loyalty, a lot of it is not quantifiable. Like if somebody knows your name when you enter the lounge, and if they already know how to make your life easier, they already know your preferences and everything. I think another trap we fall into with fire, and Me, definitely, because I'm a spreadsheet nerd. We try to quantify everything. We try to put a value on everything, where it's kind of like if somebody takes you on a really nice date and you're like, how valuable is this date? Like, are we quantifying the value of the dinner that you bought? Or like, this was an enjoyable experience. I think that's another trap we fall into very often, is trying to numerically quantify every single piece of happiness, which, guys, I'm saying this is like somebody who obsesses with numbers. It's not your best life to do that.
Is someone who has also is a bit of a spreadsheet jockey and has gone down that rabbit hole and realized, like, that's not a happy way to live. I agree.
Yeah. But people do that with their points and miles, with their fire journey, where they're like, okay, I mean, I have the spreadsheet too. You guys have all seen it on YouTube. It's not actually how I quantify how much I like my flights, where I'm like, did I get good sleep on this flight? Did I like the food? I have my completely arbitrary, this chicken pot pie was 8 out of 10 on whatever flight. They're just numbers because people seem to like numerically quantifying things. But there's
Mhm.
a lot with the status and loyalty game and just the enjoyment of travel, where you have to have some base numbers, but after that, the false precision of exactly how much enjoyment did I get out of this flight? And let's use data to decide how to live my life. It's not something that I would recommend doing day in and day out. There's a balance of just vibing and doing some actual math, but people in the fire movement, and again, me included in a past life, I've definitely seen gone way overboard with the making quantifiable decisions for every single thing.
Yeah, I think sometimes you have to get out of your head and just be like, am I enjoying this? Do I feel on, as you said, sort of vibes level, like, is this how I want to spend my time? Does it feel like this was a good use of money or points? And if it does, that's fine. Like, we don't
I
have to justify everything to everyone.
I think you don't have to justify anything to anybody except for yourself and maybe, like, anybody else who you share a bank account with, but there's also the complete other end of the spectrum where people are just like, "The vibes will provide," and there's not much financial planning at all. How do you recommend that people find their happy medium in between those of just kind of sticking their head in the sand and being like, "Vibe all the way, I have no idea what my debt payment plan is," versus somebody who's overanalyzing everything and deciding every single part of their life, like who they want to be friends with, who they want to date, where they want to live, where they want to travel, what kind of credit cards, like everything is driven by spreadsheets. How does somebody find a happy medium? Because neither of those is going to be ideal.
Yeah. Well, Ramit Sethi says that he's anti-fire and stuff. I do think that he has some wisdom that can be helpful in a fire journey, which is look at what really spend some time evaluating what gives you pleasure in life, what gives you happiness. Track your spending. If we're going to be like financially responsible adults, I think we all need to track our spending. But then like really evaluate the different categories, not to like hyper optimize everything, but to say, like, where was I kind of doing this because it looked fancy? Where was I doing this because of just inertia? It's like what I've always done. And where am I doing this because it's really joy giving and life giving? And I think doing that to figure out where you actually get value from your spending. And there's plenty of like scientific literature on this that says we actually can get pretty good hits of sort of enjoyment from smaller regular purchases. Like it does not have to be a big TV that's going to give you happiness. But I think tracking your spending, really questioning where you're getting value, and then just getting on a debt payoff journey, like the vibes will not provide. The vibes will end up sending you collection notices. So I think if you've got this combination of tracking your spending and saying, like, with every debt I pay off, I reduce my monthly minimum that I need to live by a certain amount. And you can see, like, okay, I'm making my life cheaper by taking away things I don't care about spending on. And I'm getting myself closer to debt free by doing that. It's like you get this double benefit of like you're reducing your spending because you're taking out just shit you don't care about. By taking out the shit you don't care about, you're increasing your ability to pay off your debt. When you increase your ability to pay off your debt, you're reducing the monthly minimum that you need to live, and you're getting yourself closer to financial independence. So I think we need to be very cognizant of our spending, but not in a way that says, I think I get $1.50 of pleasure out of that cup of coffee and it costs $2. So I'm going to cut it out. I think you can go too far, but I do think the head in the sand is just a road to disaster.
Do we need to be that cognizant of our spending? Like for me, my husband and I have an annual budget where we're like, don't spend more than this per year. And we're always just like way under on it. Where did that money go? Probably restaurants. I truly don't know. I could figure it out. Like, I have tracking, and by stare, I mean glance at it once
Yeah.
per month. And if like the monthly total looks a little bit weird, then I'll dig into the numbers. But is there a point where like, should we still be tracking every cent once there's a certain threshold passed in our financial journey?
I think at your point in the journey, you probably don't need to. I mean, if you're doing a check-in every quarter or so, and you're within the general bounds, confidence interval of what you want to be spending, that seems fine. And then I think don't obsess about where it's going. I think early in the journey, then it's really important because if you don't do that early in the journey, there's little chance that you're going to get to where you are, Julia. And so I think early in the journey, when there's still debt in play, I think it's really important. Once you're to the point of debt freedom, I think you can loosen up a little bit and just like trust yourself because you didn't get to this point of being financially independent by being an idiot. And you're not going to just turn into an idiot tomorrow. So you have a certain amount of like capital or trust in yourself to make good decisions. So I think early in the journey, you need to track it. I don't like budgets, but I do like tracking where the money is going. I think budgets, they work for some people, but they feel horrifically constraining to me and really irritating. I recoil against them. But knowing where your money is going, sort of retrospectively looking at it and adjusting, I think is very good early in the journey. But once the debt is gone, I think you can loosen up a little bit because you've proven to yourself that you're responsible and you get to have like a little more fun, although have some fun along the way.
For the people who are afraid of loosening up, where they're like, one day I could slip and fall and get addicted to Balenciaga, which it just seems like such a common fear of fire people where I'm like, is that's gonna be a thing? Like you're gonna get addicted to Fendi overnight? Like the shoes? I don't know what to tell people when I'm just like, you can afford to spend on that. Or hey, if you have a problem and you have money to solve that problem, like you don't really have a problem. You can just solve your problem and then go along your way. Such a strange concept for a lot of people who really don't like throwing money at problems or enjoyment.
Yeah.
What do you advise these people to do? There are people on the internet who will accept money to fix this for you, and they're just like, no, I must fix whatever problem on my own, whether it's their own bookkeeping, fix their own sink, wash their own clothes, or plan their own kid's birthday party. Like, there's somebody on the internet who will do anything for you, and probably a quality person, but a lot of people really, really struggle to let go of any money. What's your advice to them?
Yeah, I think the idea that I'll accidentally get addicted to Balenciaga is like really funny. My office is immediately above Hermes, and I look out onto Carolina Herrera. I can tell you it's an N of one when I walk to Taco Bell to get lunch sometimes because I love a good black bean crunch wrap. I have not accidentally purchased a bag. It hasn't happened. But yeah, in terms of people who've gotten too tight on their spending and who refuse to outsource anything, I think again, it's just to like do a little taste test and figure out, ask yourself, where are my biggest pain points? Where are my biggest spots of irritation? And how much would it cost to temporarily, you're not committing to it forever, but to temporarily solve this by throwing some money at it? And then say, okay, I'm going to try this for a month or 3 months or something. Maybe it's that you're really busy and you've got a big house and it gets really dirty and you don't want to spend every Friday night cleaning your house because that's misery. I think just give yourself a taste, see if you like it, see if the value prop seems to be there. If it is, great. If it's not, you can pull back. If you pull back and you're like, oh, I don't like that house cleaner going away, well, then maybe you actually were getting the value from it. But I think it's again, it's the just like figuring out what you want to do in early retirement, do test runs of things. I think for spending, do a test run. And again, just trust yourself. Like you're not going to accidentally get addicted to luxury. You've been on this path for a very long time. Now, there may be a few luxuries that you find actually give you great value in life. And they're probably not even luxuries. You just think of them that way because you've been so like frugal. But taste test one at a time. Tell yourself this is not forever. You can even just give yourself a budget of a certain amount per month or per year to say, I'm going to use this to try to solve small irritations in life.
It's great advice. And speaking of great advice, where can people find you if they are looking to learn even more about your financial journey, your points and miles journey, just discussions on how they should approach the game of financial independence and points and miles? Because there's so many different ways that you can approach these games.
There are so many different ways, and I am a tiny little voice in this space, but I'm having a lot of fun with it. I do have a podcast. It's called The Reframe. There are a couple podcasts out there called Reframe. Mine should show up top because I have the most episodes and I think everyone else has abandoned theirs. So, the Reframe podcast, I talk about basically financial independence, minimalism, stoicism, and how they can work in to help you build like a beautiful life that you love. I also have a small Substack called the Reframe Podcast. And on Instagram, I'm Kathleen at the Reframe Podcast. So I would love to touch base with anyone else who's in this space. I think that the intersection of points and miles and fire has a lot of just like beauty and fun to it. It's just so fun. So I'd love to touch base with other people who feel the same way.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Kathleen, for joining us on the show today. And congratulations again on retiring in just a few days.
Thank you. Thank you.